Hello, and welcome to episode 25. The realm of ideas is free to all. Today, it's the potential to generate novel utilities. We've had our preview on Wednesday. We basically gave an outline, as we do every week on Wednesday, of what we're going to be talking about today. So, again, we're going to return to this, in greater detail. A series of ruminations we do, Julie and myself, once a week on topics that are kind of like important to us. We basically talk about things that kind of have an interest. We use the platform basically to kind of help us crystallize the ideas. I think that one of the things that's been very beneficial is coming to understand what we think we know, and then understanding the things we don't really think we know. And sometimes by talking it through, we realize, oh, hey, this piece is good, this piece is poor. We need to work on this, we need to work on that. So, one thing I want to mention is something it's actually been made me very happy, and it's kind of been happening the last couple of weeks. Is that some of our subscribers, we have our Met subscribers, we have our CUNY subscribers, we have a couple of pieces in different kind of educational and kind of like cultural institutions in the city. We have some out of town subscribers. But what's nice is the conversations that we've had from Wednesday to Sunday kind of really have started to set the tone and kind of deepen the investigation. This week was a perfect example. Mr. Spock, who we gave a gift to, and he seemed to really appreciate it. We were happy to give it to him, which was kind of part of our kind of like Tease Tea kind of like fun pack that we had gotten. Our sponsor, Tease Tea. I actually have tonight. I have green and white tea, which I haven't had in a long time. Kind of like, yeah, it's very refreshing.
And
but
I'm
anyway,
finishing up a Tease Tea.
I'm gonna, before I read anything, I'm gonna read a kind of text stream that we had that I felt kind of developed as a result of what we had as a conversation. So let me read this. So here's what it has. Okay, so let me go back to this. This one was we had the three of us on here. So it started with a quote from El Greco. It said, "But painting being universal is speculative, and it is always possible to speculate, because everything here is to be seen can be here it is to be seen can be shown, since even in semi-darkness it is possible to make out optics and delight in them, and this must be imitated." Yes, okay.
Imitated.
Right. And we talked about the fact that speculation is a universe, in a universe, was like, yes, and in speculation is a universe. And then my comment was, and then Chris said, ontology is both connective and beyond specialization. I said, investigating the ontologies revealed in speculation are the greatest landscape for curiosity and imagination. The adventurous mind craves these ontologies. The institutions preserve those speculations that revealed consequence and will care for them as best they can until the individuals of genius generate that which will come to replace them. And then Julie said, a galaxy of speculation can be found in any one rogue synapse.
Yes.
And I said, the institutions are there to preserve the legacy in order for us to understand the principles they embodied that gave them consequence in relations to that circumstance that provoked their genius. In addition, the institutions are not there to provide us with what is to come next, or when as that is determined by those that able to recognize that circumstance for which they will contend, and to speculate as to the consequence of potential outcomes. And these conversations, have been the kind of thing that kind of help stimulate these things. I mean, that was the basis by which the realm of ideas is free to all started. It was an intent to take our ideas and kind of generate feedback. I remember when I was a professor, what I would always tell my students is, you're in an incredibly luxurious circumstance. It may not feel that way when you haven't slept in 3 days and you haven't eaten in 4 days, and you're very tired. But at the same time, what happens is you benefit from the fact that people who are of a certain level beyond yourself and who are alleged to be masterful in their craft have come to your table or your studio, and basically will give you the insight that helps you, kind of move forward. That is a luxury of education. that doesn't continue the day after your graduation. You have to seek that out. That critical acumen that is basically given to you is given to you because somebody paid for your tuition. That isn't a given in life, but it's necessary to have that. In a way, that's what the realm of ideas is free to all is for us, is that it's our ongoing conversation with ourselves. And what we've started to benefit from is these, people like Mr. Spock, who basically have enjoyed engaging with us. And I find that the success that I was looking for. All right. So what's new in Julie?
Well, I'll get my drawing that's right over here.
Let's go. Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not chiding. I'm just kind of saying I'm excited to see it. And then we'll basically read a bit from.
You actually never got to see the actual. You've only seen photos.
No, it's true.
The actual is so much
I love this
better.
drawing. This is brilliant.
Well, thanks, Puddle. You can say why you think so.
I will.
Talk about it.
Go ahead.
Okay, so it's got a lot of glare. Maybe
There is.
Zoom in, especially on just the graphite only pieces. So this is my drawing titled Hectocotyledon Ming, and a hectocotyledon is a specialized arm in octopuses and some other cephalopods, actually, that is used both for mating and predating.
Let me just add.
Yeah.
Mr. Spock, enjoy your marsupial pouch.
Oh, yes. He was so excited.
I was happy to give it to him.
It was great. He deserves it.
He does. He's our best fan.
Anyway, the Hectocotylus is the subtitle of my drawing is Dichotomy of Mating and Predating. And the reason is it would seem like two polar opposite functions. When you have a body part or an organ that functions as a mating tool and a stalking and killing tool, it does seem like these things are at odds with each other. It does seem very polarized. But interestingly, the same chemotactile sensory system is in place in the Hectocotylus for both mating and predating. It seems like, and I've done some research, interestingly, on progesterone throughout history as it appears in animal and human species. What is very interesting is it is a cross-species hormonal constant, which actually means, fascinatingly, that the functions, the uptake, the metabolic regulation of progesterone in species seemingly is unrelated as a nautilus, an octopus, a human, a horse, is remarkably self-similar, that the progesterone acts much the same way and has not changed in thousands and thousands of years. So fascinatingly, this Hectocotylus, which is an appendage, one of the arms in the male octopus, finds the female octopuses when she's ready to mate, and actually is a transit arm for sperm to literally be inserted in a stylized receptacle in the female octopus. And interestingly, in other species of cephalopod, the arm is cut off. It detaches and stays lodged in the female forever until she dies. How creepy is that? You have like a male body part of a male who tried in many cases to force themselves on the female. It wasn't that she necessarily wanted to do in your own body. I mean, it's kind of freakish.
Yeah, and we still see that behavior of kind of like pathetic scavenger men at kind of like, women's kind of feminist activities.
Yes, we do. Good one. So what I've done here is I have actually hybridized this process in octopuses with an object from the Chinese treasury, which is either from the Ming Dynasty, which is more likely, or the Yuan Dynasty. It is an ivory disc carved in bas relief with a series of, that's good, of wondrous dragons, very chimerical. And the disc is intricately carved and is on a stand. But these are two very different pieces that interact through some strange methods. And the stand is this multi-armed carved wooden marvel, very reminiscent in my mind, structurally and functionally, of octopus tentacles and suckers. And that's what I've done. And I have it moving through time in a clockwork motion where it's actually, I have drawn it upside down and the stand is sticking up. Then the stand goes to 3 o'clock. If you think of this disc as a clock face, then it goes to 6 o'clock and at 9 o'clock, all the while moving incrementally.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to hear is the balance between those pieces that kind of just kind of insinuate the geometries, then the kind of pieces that are kind of like become the extensions of these geometries, and then the actual renderings of some of the active parts. And I think what's interesting is you kind of heighten the fact that these two mechanisms, or within the organism, are quite distinctly different. So side by side, you kind of wonder for what reason it took so long to make this rather obvious kind of like revelation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, P.
Yeah. Okay. So
Tales of the Hectocotylus.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we had the introduction at the beginning of Emerson's essay on nature, which we kind of talked about in terms of the idea that one needs to kind of become aware that one can't live in the past. And I think that one of the things that also was a conversation we've had in recent weeks was the fact that certain vocations, as it were, have kind of got themselves lost in a kind of self-obsession, which has kind of created an inertia that unfortunately wraps up and kind of like in cases can actually paralyze an entire vocation. So we talked about that statement, but then I wanted to talk about the other thing is that nature recognizes this, as kind of Feynman said quite emphatically in his analysis of the space shuttle disaster. Nature cannot be fooled. So you may fool yourself, right? But the point is, it doesn't matter, about you. What matters is the fact that nature will not be fooled. So here was something that I found, and I just found this now, and I had kind of highlighted it, God knows, 20 years ago. I've always talked about this idea of organic morality or natural morality, but here it is in the words of Emerson. The moral law lies at the center of nature and radiates to the circumference. It is the path and marrow of every substance, every relation, and every process. I was like saying, oh man, I can't believe I forgot when I read that.
That's perfect.
Yes, exactly. All things with which we deal preach to us what is a farm but a mute gospel. The chaff and the wheat, weeds and plants, blight, rain, insects, sun. It is a sacred emblem from the first furrow of spring to the last stack which the snow of winter overtakes in the fields. But the sailor, the shepherd, the miner, the merchant, in their several resorts, right, have each an experience precisely parallel and leading to the same conclusions, because all organizations are radically alike. Nor can it be doubted that this moral sentiment, which thus scents the air and grows in the grim and impregnated the waters of the world, is caught by man and sinks into his soul. So at the moment that happens, you engage your circumstance as an extension of yourself. Just as we talked about the fact that in the ability to understand the abstraction, you understand the abstraction does not exist irrelevant of its circumstance. And in fact, it's its circumstance that gives it consequence. So that's where we begin.
Mhm.
And how do we understand that in terms of the potential to generate novel utilities? So, what could conceivably some of the circumstances that might lead us to benefit from those things that can turn what I would call a sentimental romanticism, if it even deserves the term romanticism, to a healthy, romantic, intellectual, organic system?
Lignification.
Oh, there we go. I saw that coming.
Or did you now?
Yes, you did, Pete, because you talked about, in fact,
I
you ended the
did.
program with that.
Well, yes, I did.
Yeah.
So,
I like when you say precisely.
well, yes,
I love that. But that's, yeah, that's
precisely.
precise.
Anyway, I
Start
will
us off,
be
big one.
Starting us off. I'm so tired.
Mm.
Oh,
Have,
so what do you
have.
think of the green tea white?
I actually have always liked the green tea light. I think in terms of the refreshing,
It's very crisp.
in terms of the refreshing nature,
Mhm.
I'd say after mint for the summer. In fact, I'm going to have a couple of these in my refrigerator at work, and
He's
kind
so
of have
happy
the.
about
Oh, I
that.
love my refrigerator at work. It kind of like has a little kind of pouch where you can put little kind of beverages, or like they kind of
I have
dispense.
to get you like an ironing board, and I'm still coming.
Okay, but I think that after mint, this is probably the most refreshing.
The green tea
Yeah,
white.
yeah. I think that, like, the one that's the most complex to me is the one that's most pleasing is the jasmine.
Oh, the jasmine.
The one that's most complex is probably the green. The green has just a really intricate, complex. I mean, I miss rose, but again,
No,
I mean, I'm
it's
going to
so
start,
sad.
putting roses on the fire escape. Anyway, so
That's true.
go ahead,
Okay.
start.
So let me begin with plant science. Always a great place to start with a beautiful green sprout. So lignification, what is it and why is it important? So lignins are how plants adapt to their environments. They're avatars of rapid evolution and advantageous morphologies. What they do is they make plants woody. It's the woodification. They actually go into the plant cells and make them rigid. Thank you. Make them strong. And when a plant that had a green shoot starts to acquire a noticeable, observable trunk, that is lignification. Now, this is something that terrestrial plants do. However, such an exciting revelation is a missing link between aquatic and terrestrial plants. Now, aquatic plants don't need, because they're not fighting gravity, they have the water that holds them up, tend to kind of drift with the tide, drift with the currents. They don't need to stand strong on their own against all the weather on the surface of the earth because they are underwater. So they tend to be very flexible, very bendy, very fluid, and non-woody, non-lignified. But there is a species of crustose algae called Calliarthrin, which is a genus that contains two species of crustose algae. This genus has lignin, which is highly unusual and contains secondary cell walls. Also, very strange for aquatic plants. Traits which are normally associated with vascular or terrestrial plants. Now, to extend this incredible adaptation or the persistence and the generation's case of a novel utility is that Calliarthron is calcified but possesses uncalcified joints, which is absolutely fascinating. So if you think of the hand and the human joint, this is in order to flex in wave response or in response to ocean or sea waves or currents. So if you had a calcified joint underwater, you would be completely rigid. So this algae has made a process that it would never normally have into a kind of hybridized process of incredible novel utility by decalcifying with age. Now, this is fascinating. So, part one, okay, post decalcification, this algae lengthens. As it gets older, it gets taller and it fattens. So, it gets taller and fatter as it ages and acquires the traits of land plants or xylem, which is not something usually associated either, to make secondary lignin joints and walls. So, I mean, that's a fascinating novel utility. Back to you.
Okay. So I think, one of the things is this a point where we are able to forge a kind of novel utility that is a result of a change of paradigmatic structure? Are we in a position where things give us that potential to kind of forge a new age? I believe so. I believe that some of the things that have kind of like happened are starting to kind of like develop and expose the inertial realities of the institution and the things that are kind of in our midst, at least as far as I can see it, kind of give an indication that some of the things that we've been working on may in fact be able to kind of move us into a new circumstance. What you're talking about very much reminds me of a symbiogenesis, which for the most part in the times in which it was talked about was kind of disregarded as something of inconsequence. But now we've come to see, as things like horizontal gene transfer and gene sharing have shown us, that there's actually a network capacity rather than a kind of branching capacity in the way in which things are connected. So this is an idea that kind of like doesn't challenge, but kind of complicates and kind of gives another added layer of intricacy to the way in which organisms kind of come about and coexist.
It's an arborizing idea.
Well, it's a different arborizing idea. It's basically a network as opposed to a branching structure. I mean, we understand the tree of life, but now we're kind of finding, and it's been talked about more and more, but it's still kind of like an emerging field, which is the idea of a kind of network of life. And I think that kind of talks about it kind of puts a primacy on different network structures that have a capacity to kind of give us a lot more kind of like potential. I mean, we've talked a lot about the kind of like the carbon, the nitrogen fixing root nodules. We've talked about the kind of mycorrhizal fungus and the kind of like interrelated kind of networks that are much more of a kind of network than they are a branching structure. So I think that that's one thing. Another thing is I think that we're looking at the fact that certain things have happened in technology that have a potential to give us, and in society that give us a potential to again look to a different place. I think that in my particular field, at least the one that I was brought up in, technology was not looked upon, science was not looked upon. There were these kind of like really kind of what I would call insipid or fetishistic kind of like formalist kind of like obsessions, which I would say were technologically ignorant, intellectually kind of like anti-intellectual. They didn't really take into account those things that were happening around it. So it became this kind of hermetic obsession that really kind of left architecture in a place where people lost an interest in anything that was going on there. It kind of seemed to be this kind of thing that kind of lost consequence. And I think, being isolated and kind of intentionally and looking to kind of forge my own way, I had kind of lost sight of this kind of obsession and fetish. So it wasn't really important to me because I was out doing my own thing. So now going back to it and kind of coming back across the architectural landscape, I find that very much there's still this kind of, these kind of what I would call these inconsequential obsessions, while at the same time the opportunities are opening up for what I would say a truly organic architecture, which is now something that would not be as upset, like as ludicrous an observation as it was when I kind of first proposed it. But anyway, I see that the potential is going to come more from technique than it's actually going to become from a kind of a structure. I think that the technique and the desires that we see for the technique to fill is going to be that which kind of moves us towards that. Anyway, so
I'd like to discuss Marcel Duchamp's The Box in a Valise. For anyone who doesn't know about this incredibly important aspect of Duchamp's, not just his work, but his mindset, his entire way of thinking and planning and basically manifesting his work. So, I don't want to get this.
Okay,
wait,
yeah,
thanks.
Okay. So that way you kind of ready for your long kind of like dissertation here, because I'm looking forward to this one. And I also was thinking about something in terms, you talked about you're talking about a certain kind of writer a couple of weeks ago. Kind of like, was it a kind of
send this to you? Yeah.
But what was, remember, because I was thinking about that when I was reading Emerson on Nature. The kind of natural essayist or something?
Yes.
What was the term?
Yes.
See if I can find it in our
notes.
Yeah,
I think you took a note. Anyway, I'll continue here while you look. Okay. So for anyone who has not yet gone to the phenomenal exhibition at MoMA that just opened, where you can see a number of Marcel Duchamp's box in valises, and an enormous amount of his work, early paintings, early drawings, his prefabs and pre-mades. These are not sandwiches.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. Scientific
anyway, let me focus on this. So what is key is the potentiality for greatest novel utility, I conjecture, is manifested in times of dire existential crises, meaning in this case, the rise of fascism in Europe, the suppression of democracy and free will, and the galloping four horsemen of the apocalypse rapidly approaching World War II. So with these apocalyptic forces surrounding the artists, the writers, the singers, the performers in Europe, it swallowed imagination. It ground down creativity to dust. I mean, it threatened everything that is important. It threatened and killed
millions.
Well, yes, and the best of us. I'm going to leave it at that because that's not what we're here for now. But I would like to read you a treatise on his box in a valise. And this is a quote: "Everything important that I have done can be put into a small suitcase." Who's that?
No, find out.
Anyway, so nearing the age of 50, Duchamp embarked on The Box in a Valise from 1935 to 1941, a collection of 69 miniature reproductions of his own artworks that he had made, that he had crafted between 1910 and 1936, in the years leading up to World War II. So Duchamp later characterized it as his portable museum. When he began the project, unbelievably, none of his works had yet entered any museum collections. This solo show in miniature was Duchamp's way of making his own retrospective. So, Marcel, he created the box in a valise amid the rise of fascism in Europe, like I said, and the outbreak of World War II. But I'd say more importantly than in the treatise, not at the outbreak, most of the artists, Paul Klee, Max Ernst, Kandinsky, Salvador Dali, Picasso, all saw World War II coming long before a lot of other people did, actually. So he initiated this project in Paris before moving to the south of France. I think moving is not a word that I would have chosen. Fleeing is the word that I would have chosen.
Yeah, it was the right word.
So he fled to the south of France to escape the Nazi occupation of France. He subsequently immigrated not by choice because Europe was destroyed and left in ruins, as many, many artists had to. He was really forced to immigrate to the United States in 1942, joining many fellow European artists in exile. There he debuted the box in a valise at the opening exhibition of Art of This Century, the gallery owned by his patron, Peggy Guggenheim, who was certainly a patron of the arts and at least did something with her wealth that was really, really great. Anyway, he continued to assemble copies of the box in a valise through the end of his life, producing more than 300 of them across 7 series. And for those of you who don't know what they look like this. So they are combinations of small pieces of his paintings. They are very small boxes that fold up to like the size of a briefcase. And they have models, actual built objects, architectural models. Sorry, it was a bit long, but I really had to explain what this was about.
That's an interesting
one. This is very interesting. Sure, absolutely. Cool. I'm going to send this to you.
Yeah.
And these are at MoMA now, and this is a rare opportunity. They're incredibly fragile. A lot of them are on loan. They don't travel well.
Kind of even though that was their idea.
Well, yes. At the time, they actually did travel well, because if you think about it, they have survived almost a century, and they still look like this. So honestly, I mean, and this is a close-up. You can see copies of his nude descending the staircase, although I'm a bigger fan of The Bride, and specifically The Bride puts off The Bachelors, which is just a wrenching thing. Anyway, these are tremendous. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the things that I kind of touched on briefly on Wednesday was the fact that I think that certain circumstances exist that are great opportunities and should not be missed. One of them is the fact that we had an organic impulse in architecture in the United States leading up to and into the 20th century. And it kind of had been subverted, but I think it was an understanding similar to what Emerson's talking about. And I think it was something that gave us something where now, given our present circumstances, we have, I think, the ability to kind of take greater advantage. I think that there was a certain aesthetic to the European fixation with the machine, but I think there was a greater value to the American obsession with the organic landscape. I think that America was, is, and continues to be an agrarian nation that has aspects of kind of urban culture, which it has adopted and inherited from its European legacy. But I don't know if necessarily we need to kind of see that as a transplant over which we don't understand our own agrarian roots. So as a result, I find that certain technological advances, such as mobility, folding, and other kind of ways in which information can be stored, has allowed us to basically have a possibility for a more nomadic existence. I think that nomadic existence can step beyond the machine and basically set itself into beyond a mechanism and into an organism. Now, how does that manifest itself? I think what it does is gives an opportunity for different ways to approach, not necessarily just to overcome the kind of things like the kind of hermetic and isolated anthropocentric nature of the way in which we build, but to see the utilities that could come about as a result of the thing, such as the fact that with my technological capacity, I can have my entire library here. I can basically say, what is the nature of objects that kind of inhibit my mobility? It's a good question. What are those technological capacities that allow me these things? I mean, I now see the fact that I don't necessarily have to work at my at a place that is specific to a congregation with other individuals. Most of us are starting to see that reality. We saw that in COVID. And in fact, I'd say one of the great opportunities of COVID was the fact that we knew that there was a potential to kind of, again, see the resilience of buildings. And we completely ignored that possibility. What I mean by that was there was a point where the city was empty. And one of the things I'll always remember was one of the most incredible things I ever saw was to be in New York City, in Manhattan, and be the only person there.
Creepy as hell.
It was creepy and it was beautiful. I mean, I remember, when I was kind of caretaking a series of things in and around, Upper Midtown,
that's
and
right. There was
there was nobody there, and it's
Midtown, which is packed
I would
people,
walk, and it's one thing to walk into a subway at an odd time and find just a few people milling about, but one of the things you realized was there's always someone milling about. This was the exception. So it was one thing to walk into a subway station that had few people, but to walk into a subway station that had 0 people was a completely unique experience. Now, being in architecture, design, and construction, a lot of times you're in empty buildings, so you get a chance to see buildings that are empty.
You have a very,
but in this case, all I had, it was a kind of, and I love that. I love the idea of kind of seeing things and kind of imagining their potential.
You're unusual.
Tell me about it.
I know.
But the thing was, here was the opportunity that now we could reimagine this landscape. And I was kind of a little bit fearful that people would kind of really jump at the opportunity to say, we don't need these offices. And we see so many places where the brick and mortar office is kind of a liability. Here was the opportunity to see that happen in reality. But I think the need for people to exert control in a kind of micromanaging way was something we're not ready to give up yet.
It's the nature of people.
Well, it's the nature of people at the moment. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Well, next week, Julie will be here by herself. We won't Penguin and I'll find something else to do. Go ahead, Pete. Go ahead, Pete. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, it's okay.
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah, well, I don't know. He's like, I'm sorry, everyone. Julie needs to say. Go ahead.
Are you sure? Sorry.
Yeah.
No, if you want to continue on your notes.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
No, puddle. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, here's an idea I think you might find very intriguing. Okay. So I believe that we have not been as linguistically geared as we might on our YouTube channel.
Oh.
So I am going to change that now.
Okay.
So the potential, if it's okay with you.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So the potential for novel utility can be observed in the rather visceral history of a single Italian verb. and I will take you on an unexpected journey from food history to plant science to opera history, classical music, and a rather wrenching cultural preoccupation with sound modulation and anatomical alteration of the human voice. Is good?
Yeah.
Okay. So in Venice, in the early spring, a bit of food history. There is a dish that is native to specifically the Venetian lagoons. It's quite an esoteric dish. It's called castrore, Castraure, almost like a version of my last name if you switch around the letters. And it's from the verb castrare, to cut or castrate on purpose. So the dish are the first purple artichokes served with pecorino or parmesan, lemon, extra virgin olive oil, and courgettes or baby zucchini and courgette flowers. Now, here's where we get to the verb for to castrate. So, castrare. Let's hop to plant science, agriculture, and farming. The first artichokes to appear on the main central stem of the artichoke plant are unceremoniously cut off, and it is castrated, which sparks, enables, and actually prompts the rushed artificial growth of the 18 to 20 artichokes, which will then sprout from secondary stems. So this prompts a completely artificial growth pattern.
Interesting. So your castrati of my last rumination is possible to grow stems that will give me more kind of like attempts to kind of, if you give me the opportunity to speak later on in the episode.
That's well put.
You think?
Yeah.
It's up to you.
Sorry, Pete.
No, Pete.
Okay. Bottle. I'm sorry. Penguil.
Okay. All right. So.
Oh, and then the final one.
Of course.
Okay. So
we wouldn't
opera
risk
history.
It.
And we shan't.
No, we shan't.
Opera history, a castrato, plural, castrati, is, for those of you who don't know, a male singer who was forcibly castrated before puberty, which is 8 to 10 years old, was the age, to maintain the equivalent voice of a female soprano or mezzo soprano. So they never developed their larynx normally.
Right.
Okay.
No, I think it's interesting because I think in this case,
Sorry,
the organic opportunities, right, that are kind of afforded. I mean, Julie's given us a tremendous amount of examples of these circumstances that came across the ability to make a compelling argument for circumstance. And to kind of, what happens is, and we kind of go back to the stream that we had, this was kind of the overall pieces that we were talking about. And it's, kind of something that, let me just go back to this. And, we talk, the reality is the institutions preserve these, speculations that revealed consequence and will care for them as best they can until the individuals of genius reemerge and generate that which was next to come. So I think in this case, we need to, as we talked about in Emerson, recognize those and see how they can basically kind of allow us to take advantage of the opportunities that are to come. So like I said, I mean, we see the fact that being aware of the fact that we're starting to see, I see a relationship to the fact that the folding of deployables in many houses and some of these other things that I see fascinate me as to the opportunities for us to have an ability to take advantage of this mobility and this kind of freedom to kind of really further engage in that opportunity that is America. America is an agrarian people. It's an adventurous people. We started as a bunch of kind of like silly little people on the East Coast, and we kind of managed to kind of branch out and find our way all the way till we ran out of land and we were at another coast. And there was that opportunistic aspect of us that basically saw the potential to create value. And I think one of the things that exists as a desire to have a market-based reality that is regulated with as little imposition as possible is the fact that there's a difference between kind of like generating in an activity and creating value. Novel utility creates value. We will talk about value in times to come, but the reality is that's what allows for the opportunity, is that circumstance that you create value. You create value for yourself, you create value for your community, you create value in a universal sense. But the idea is, what is that? And that's the thing in which we're looking to engage right now. So my feeling is the opportunity is here. The circumstance is starting to kind of generate itself for us. And I think there are things that we can talk about that will allow us to kind of discover what those things are. When I was talking to Mr. Spock today at the Met while I was drawing, we talked about the idea that I've had this idea of how to generate an organically kind of generated kind of, organic design thinking. And I see the potential where it could actually take place. I think it's just a question of sitting down and generating from this approach. But I think it took me a while to develop my drawing skills to the point where they become possible of doing it. I think that I look at the analogy of the fact that when the artists left the institutions and kind of left school and started to go out and generate their own unique abstractions, and started to see themselves beyond the limitations of what they were kind of constricted by the institutions, they started to kind of see that emancipation that was necessary to forge that new identity. I was talking with someone last week, one of our kind of friends, and he talked about his mother, who's a gifted pianist, and she was told, "You're a performer, you're not a composer," and that her own improvisations were to be frowned upon and to be suppressed. And I think what I'm seeing is, if the institution fails to be able to show consequence in terms of the challenges that it can provide for our imagination and our curiosity, so be it. But if they cannot, right, this is a perfectly healthy circumstance. The time basically will leave behind it a legacy, of which another legacy for something new is to come. So the techniques by which we engage, right, have a tremendous opportunity to kind of come against these things and basically forge new opportunities and new paths. How we do it, it really is up to us. But I see a dissatisfaction. I see a desire to take our impulses, and just like the Gothic period, that was a beautiful show. It's a beautiful show at the Met. You see these desires trying to manifest themselves, even though they really do not have all the capacities necessary. That's not necessary to have it. You basically just have to see that place from which you want to move. Anyway, so saying that, okay, don't worry about it, Pete. So anyway,
Okay.
So back to you, my love.
Okay, Pete.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to say that put me in the mood for eating artichokes, which is interesting. And I just wanted to say a big hi to our friends and new subscribers at Ferdi Italian Restaurant.
I have to go there.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are going to go there very, very soon. So Ferdi, the only day they're closed is Tuesday,
Good.
so don't go on a Tuesday.
Mhm.
Is sophisticated and relaxing, and the food is marvelous. It's on 7th Avenue in the West Village near Bedford Street. The food is phenomenal, the quality of the ingredients. And the owner, who was named after her grandmother, not the opera, is Aida. And she's lovely. And she's our newest, one of our new ASC YouTube subscribers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I've gotten, especially in the last month, I've had so much interaction, so much engagement with our subscribers, and like I said, one of the things that has been incredibly enriching to me is the fact that I can extend these ruminations beyond myself and Julie to engage directly with the people who kind of like, become part of our community. And like I said, we have groups of followers in certain places, and some of these institutions are very dear to us and very important, but most important are the people themselves. And I mean,
absolutely,
I look, it's been kind of like someone's turned on a switch, and I've been kind of like invigorated by the ability to kind of by the opportunity to engage so fervently with these people and our new friends.
Yes, we have friends at MoMA. We have friends at the Noy Gallery. We have friends at the Cooper Hewitt. So
but we have people at the New York Public Library, our people at the Met, and our friends, numerous friends at City College. And so and as time goes on, we will grow this kind of community, and further engage in this realm of ideas being free to all. So anyway, have any let's see, last words, my loved one.
Oh yes, I'll get into this more in future shows. I only touched on it about a month ago, but mycofabrication is, I think, one of the ultimate forms of novel utility, prompting a whole field of organic architecture. So this proposes a near future codependent symbiosis. This is my take on it, between humans and fungi, utilizing organic architecture as the petri dish. So white rot fungal species, of which there are many, are in this case the primary building materials. The paradox is death before use. I'll say that again. Death before use. So in fact, the afterlife of the white rot fungus is the novel utility potentiality. I think this is one of the most
interesting. It's interesting because it's like it's as if we're in a situation where there's a kind of like organic necrophilic circumstance, and in this case, you inhabit corpse, almost like maggots on a carcass. And it's interesting because I think once you get out of your kind of ick factor of the fact that certain things are not acceptable, you kind of start to see these things as incredibly interesting in terms of opportunities. One of the things, I think probably one of the first places this started for me was our engagement with the Museum of Natural History and some of our friends there, when we started to realize that, like, it's not terrible to eat bugs. It's just that bugs they're not that tasty.
They're really not.
No, and it's like
an awful lot of
and
them.
you have to eat an awful lot
like
of them.
Mountains.
Exactly, and it's like the only thing you taste is the seasonings because they themselves have very little taste.
Or you can eat one chicken breast.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I mean,
yeah, because I mean, honestly, the reality is, it's like it's like where somebody says like, what is like snake, or there's like, oh, it tastes like chicken. When you eat most insects, they taste like fingernails. And it's like that is it. They taste like fingernails because
or
it's kind of like
honey chili fingernails.
Exactly.
Because they really
are, because all you're really eating is the chitin.
Yeah.
And it's like, it tastes like when I chew my fingernails, that's
just weird.
Yeah. But I mean, I think one of the things that I see here is as we engage in this, and next week, let me see what I look at, the consequence of underlying principles. Perfect. I think sometimes we put these things, and like right now, we're all the way up to episode 92, which is 31st of October, which is natural morality. And the last one before that would be understanding and judgment. But what happens is, since we have all these things laid out quite in advance, sometimes we kind of like, it takes a while to come back around to an idea. But in this case, it works out really well, because one of the things that I find is the importance of the legacy of the institutions to make sure that people understand the principles by which the things that are important were generated. And I think that is kind of one of the things that has a plus and a minus. It has a plus in the fact that it's because of the principles and the ability to kind of like compound and complicate the principles and basically forge new ones is incredibly valuable. And I think sometimes the idea is sometimes forgetting the principles have a value in the fact that a constriction basically is kind of like is kind of is thrown off. In fact, I remember when Lisa Randall was talking about something that she had done, and she had kind of been given herself a kind of, I think, a problem to solve in her work, and she didn't understand that this was a longstanding query that in a related field they had really struggled to kind of comprehend. And she, because she was unburdened by this idea of it being a difficult problem, managed to come to a solution. So I think sometimes forgetting that you have the shackles is also almost as good as not having them. But I think in this case, as we're looking to kind of see this new path, that's the opportunity that comes. I think we also have to do a show on the idea of the scientific essayist, because reading the piece that I read, today, kind of finding this piece in Nature by Emerson. In fact, as soon as we're done, I'm going to read this during the read back, because I find that it's been a while since I read the entirety, and I found it for a certain thing that I wanted to return to. So anyway, last word, my loved one.
Yes, the white rot fungus has a voracious yet mundane present, but an adventurous, boldly experimental future following their mass death, then living a purely architectural afterlife. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I think that like the idea is, one of the things I've always sensed is like there's this idea of what I would call a natural morality. I mean, we always assume morality to be that within the consequence of humans, and mostly within the consequence of religion. Now, I'm not against religion. I'm just not a religious person. I think that there is a possibility that there is spirituality. There is an idea there are things that there could be a hierarchical relationship of organisms by which one could see this idea of a kind of like stratification. I personally am not against the idea of believing in God. I just have never found reason to believe it as it's articulated in any of the major religions. The one part I am really against, though, is not even the proselytizing, but the demand of kind of like to basically come under. I'm not the kind of person who feels as if living in a free world, one can dictate to me what I need to believe or what I want to know. So in that case, I'm really truly against that idea of people kind of suppressing people's desires or imposing their beliefs on them. So in that regard, that's something we'll talk about, in the future. But I think scientific essayist is definitely a program as well. So anyway, the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to the benefit of all for us to keep it just that way.
Precisely.
Yes.